I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Education for the School District of Baraboo to order for Monday, May the 11th, 2015 with roll call. Mr. Cummings is not here. Mr. McNevin is not here. Mr. Meering.
Here.
Mr. Mortimer.
Here.
Ms. Riley.
Here.
Mr. Vedro's not here at the present. He says he will be arriving shortly. And Vodak here. Continue with the pledge. The flag is behind the counter by the clock. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're entertaining a motion to approve the minutes of the board meeting from April the 27th as printed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Riley, seconded by Mortimer. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, minutes thus approved. Brings us to correspondence. I have none, and I do not have any from any other board members. Turn to administrative correspondence.
No administrative correspondence.
Hearing none, let's move to public viewpoints. Is there anyone here for public viewpoints tonight? Any public viewpoints? Any public viewpoints? It'll be a quick meeting.
Mm.
There is?
Is public viewpoints like we share our ideas?
Yes.
I just want to say like...
You need to come up, I'm sorry, you need to come up by the microphone, and then if you'd state your name, please, before you
Hey, good day.
address.
I'm Greg Hawes. I just want to say I think that there should be a class at Baraboo that teaches about like the top 5 religions that are in the world for one of our elective classes, that we should be able to have a class not that just teaches about one religion, what's right, but what like their beliefs, but a class that teaches about all kinds of religions that are in the world and that are there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public viewpoints? Any other public viewpoints? Any other public viewpoints? Hearing none, let's move to staff and student recognition. And first up from the middle school, social studies teacher Linda Garcia and Ashley Cornwell. And we're going to talk a little bit and have them show us the National History Day project.
Good evening, my name is Linda Garcia. I'm an 8th grade U.S. History teacher at Jack Hill Middle School. Thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight and talk to you about National History Day and our students' work. Before coming to work at Jack Hill Middle School, I spent some time working at the Wisconsin Historical Society, raising money for the foundation. My first experience with National History Day was as a judge when I was asked to volunteer. And I was very impressed with the work and enthusiasm of the students whose competition presentations I evaluated, and I was left with a very positive view of the program. So, when I was asked to teach 8th grade at the middle school, I was eager to integrate National History Day into our curriculum. During the last 2 years, my 8th grade colleagues and I have required all 8th grade students to complete a history research project on a topic of their choice related to the NHD theme and within the requirements of National History Day. This year the theme was Leadership and Legacy in History, and students are allowed to choose a topic, analyze that topic using a variety of primary and secondary sources, and then they create a project in one of 5 different formats to submit for competition. They can create an exhibit, write a dramatic performance, write a historical research paper, build a website, or create a documentary film, which Ashley did. This year, JYMS had 11 students participate in the regional competition in February, and one of those 11, Ashley, was selected to compete in the state competition, which took place on April 25th. Ashley is a hardworking, intelligent, and curious 8th grade student, and it has been my pleasure to work with her on this project. I will let her tell you a little bit more about her project, and then we'll show you a short 2-minute clip.
Good evening, members of the school board, parents, teachers, staff, and community members. My name is Ashley Cornwell, and I did my National History Day project on John F. Kennedy and the space race. I chose this topic because it was interesting to me, and I felt that it strongly related to this year's theme because JFK's leadership helped America land a man on the moon and leave a legacy of America's capability to expand our technology and accomplish our goals. The clip I will show explains President Kennedy's leadership in promoting NASA in the United States space program.
On November 8, 1960, John F. Kennedy was elected as president. John F. Kennedy was an important part of the space race. His leadership helped NASA grow and accomplish their goals, and leave a legacy of America's capability to expand its technology. On April 12, 1961, a Soviet cosmonaut, Yuri Gagarin, became the first man in space and the first to orbit the Earth in Vostok 1. Almost a month later, Alan D. Shepard became the first American in space, although not in orbit. Later that month, on May 25th, President Kennedy pledged to America during his speech to Congress to land a man on the moon before the decade was out.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
He showed full support for NASA and asked Congress to raise NASA's budget. Recently after the speech, Congress increased NASA's budget by 89%, and the next year by 101%. President Kennedy conveyed the importance of exploring space and winning the space race at Rice University on September 12, 1962, during his public address. He explained to America that we choose to go to the moon because it is a necessary challenge and part of our goal to lead as a nation. He highlights how close we are to achieving the moon goal by mentioning the testing of the Saturn C-1 booster rocket, the Saturn missile, satellites, and the moon.
That was me, sorry about that. But that was just where we were gonna cut it off. Thank you very much, you have one more part to say. Well, thank you for letting us come and show just a portion of her video, and thank you for your support of the program, Mr. Gunnell, and we just wanted to let you know what we have going on. So,
Well, and I wanted to mention that this documentary is 10 minutes. Is it on the web page? Or?
It could be, I have it on my YouTube site, but I can email it out too. So.
That would be nice, they could see the whole thing.
Yeah, it's
And I was
10 minutes
excited when I heard about the project from Jay McMahon, and she recommended that we bring you forward tonight and share what you've been working on. And I know it took quite a while to get to where you're at right now. And this is the first time ever, I think, that we've had a student participate at state level, right?
Second time.
Second time?
We had one
I thought
last year, and Ashley's our second.
Awesome.
Liam and Jake went last year.
Well, yeah, I think it benefits them that you've been part of this before as a judge, and so thank you for showing the leadership and getting the kids involved in these projects. I think that's wonderful. On behalf of the board, here's a certificate of appreciation for your leadership. Thank you, Linda, for coming tonight. And for you, Ashley, here's an Honors for Excellence. And thank you for the great work that you've done. We look forward to seeing what you're going to come up with at the high school. So congratulations.
Moving then to reports. First up, Jen Mason from C.G. Schmidt for a construction summary update. Those in the community probably have seen activity over at East Schools.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for putting me so early. I feel like I'm going to be missing out now. Brought my intern today.
Good. Sure to be good.
So as you mentioned, you may have seen some construction starting at East. Now this is the upper corner, so we just started foundation work on April 27th. So we moved away all the wood chips, got the playground equipment put away safely, and then we started the foundation. The footings are in progress. I know it's not the most exciting start. It's exciting for us. I don't know if it's underwhelming for everybody here, but believe me, it gets more exciting. So footings are in progress. We're going to put foundation walls up, so it's building concrete up. The masonry comes right after Memorial Day, so right before school lets out. So we're going to put up some masonry walls there, and then the steel gets delivered because it sits in the masonry pockets. So everything's coming, and then you're going to really see things start to take shape as school comes to an end. So again, I know this is kind of underwhelming. So hopefully this is more exciting. This is what it's going to look like. I don't know how many
That is exciting.
I love this elevation. I think it's going to be really neat. I love glass, and I think that elevation is fantastic. So you're looking at that upper corner where the guys are standing. It's in that upper corner.
Mm-hmm.
And the eyebrow's going to be gone. On the front of the building, as you can see in this picture, it's gone. So you're going to have all new windows. It'll be really nice. It's even more exciting. Less underwhelming, much more overwhelming, is how exciting the interior is going to look. Now, there's just a rendering, but it's showing you the undulating ceilings, all the splashes of color, the new furniture we picked out this week. I shouldn't say we, I just kind of watched. Jeff picked out some colors. Jeff picked out some colors. It's going to be a really beautiful space. So I know it might be underwhelming now, but it's going to be, it looks kind of small, but it's going to be fantastic when it's done. I'm pretty excited myself. What else we have going on? We have asbestos abatement. Again, not exciting. This is the most fantastic picture I've ever seen of asbestos. It makes it look like a magical process. We had a pre-bid. It's not magical.
No, it's
A
messy.
lot of plastic, a lot of people looking like they come from the future. There's a pre-bid walkthrough on the 6th, so it was just last week. We got a really good turnout. We have at least three fantastic firms that are going to bid it, and more importantly, that they have the manpower to do it, because this is a really busy time of year for them. School season is crazy everywhere across the state. Actually, one of the bidders has people in Iowa right now, so we're going to drag their guys back if there's a successful bidder. Just to get all this abatement work done. Priority is going to be East and West School because there's just so many windows. So we've timed it so that the windows are coming in at the same time. So we're not going to see a lot of boarding unless we have to, but we're going to try to put the windows in right behind the asbestos abatement. So you're going to start seeing improvement right away. And it saves a lot of time and no rework. And then we're also going to have, the immediate priority is schools with summer programs. They're going to be working from the minute you guys walk out the door. They're going to be covering everything in plastic behind you and getting all that done and air testing it before all the kids come back. And I don't know if everybody's familiar with the process. What they do is they abate it. They do a test before, they do a test during, and they do an air test after. And then we're going to publish all those results to make it very clear. It's a very safe process. You won't see any particles floating through the air. It'll be very safe for everybody. So that we'll make sure they're going to do that over the weekend so it's safe for kids to come back to school on Monday. Again, we will publicize that. Anybody who needs the information will be more than happy to provide it, because I know I'd want it to. Bids are due this Friday, and a contract will follow. I'm not actually handling this process. This is all being handled by the school district, but I am coordinating it with my scope of work. So that's the windows and making sure we prioritize their demo and making sure we get them in and get what they need done. Some other things that's happened this week at Jack Young Middle School, the FCS room, or also called the face room on the drawings, is changing to a STEM space. So right now, you'll see around the perimeter of the room, there's a lot of sinks, there's a lot of appliances, there's a hood in the middle, and some casework. So we all met as a group, both on a conference call and last week's progress meeting, to talk about how we're going to reconfigure that room, what kind of furniture needs there are to make that a STEM space. We're all really excited to see that. We actually haven't seen the real changes yet. They're drawing them up right now. That'll be construction bulletin number 4. And we're all, again, excited just to see this change in use.
When is that going to be finished, the drawings of that?
I think in the next couple of weeks. I just kind of ironed out all the details last Wednesday. So I
Okay.
need to have a little bit of time to draw.
So we can get that forward to them?
Oh, yeah.
I'd love
Yeah,
to see that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing it too.
Yeah.
Right now, what we're working on behind the scenes is preparing to start for June 10th when you guys leave. And we've been getting a lot of materials, making sure that our windows and storefronts are coming in on time, the storefronts being all the glass for the new entryways. The unit ventilators and the cabinet heaters, those are a long lead item, and make sure that those are all right. Rooftop units for East and Jack Young. Interior and exterior light fixtures, so some of the ones for the parking lot, and all of the ones for the interior, that's another long lead item they get to get as soon as possible. And again, structural steel, which will be here the first week of June. All long lead items that we want to make sure is here. Masonry isn't a long lead item, that's just kind of stuff we buy off the shelf, which is nice for East. So that's already here, we didn't have to procure that as quickly. What else is going on is there's early contractor work happening in a lot of the schools. And Jeff asked me this morning, or this afternoon before I started talking, to kind of get more of a day-to-day schedule. But we're going to have 2 contractors that are starting right this week, and that is H&H, the electrician, and QCS. QCS does all of the sensor and communication controls between the unit vents, basically making them talk so that the whole system will work and monitor itself. So they're going to be pulling sensor wires, you won't even know they're there. They hired local contractor Hills Wiring to do all their work, which is great because then it was just another way to get more local participation because they weren't able to bid the work because they were bidding something else. So it's nice to get them in the project somehow. So QCS will be working on that, and then H&H Electric, all mostly former Hills Wiring employees that now work for H&H. They're going to be running conduits through the tunnels in the boiler rooms. So again, you won't see them either. They're going to be like little trolls in the tunnel in the boiler rooms where it's dark and dirty. And they'll be doing a lot of their service work ahead of time. Everybody's just trying to get a jump start on the schedule because it gets really busy. This is something we can do preemptively to make sure they're not wasting their time doing that, prioritizing on getting the new stuff in. So it's really quick. We're really working on East. That's where you see most of the progress. If you guys have any questions, or if anybody wants to come see the job, we're more than happy to share it with you. Please jot my email down. If there's anything you want to see me talk about for these updates or anything you're interested in, I might have either just not know what you're interested in, and I could overdork you with stuff I think is interesting. So if you want me to kind of cater this to what you guys would like to see, just let me know.
Well, when we're doing our STEM outline and so forth, are we working with our science group then on that too? Our curriculum?
Well, I'm not sure if I
Our
understand the
science,
question.
you know, our science, we have a science cohort, right?
The curriculum was already presented.
But not the curriculum, but now the room, I mean, so that, are they giving their input on?
I think the input that we've really relied on the most is coming from Project Lead the Way, which is the curricular instructional materials that we're planning to use.
Sure.
And they actually have worked prior to coming to our district with EUA on what are some typical designs for STEM classrooms.
Sure.
And so that guide, that design guide has been really helpful for all of us in terms of looking at, you know, what kind of space do we need around the perimeters of the room and what kind of furniture we might need to make sure that we have the right kind of working space for students.
Okay.
But also, what we did is we went to Middleton, which is known for their middle school STEM class, and we looked at their setup, because Cromery Middle School is a relatively new construction,
Sure.
remodeled, I should say.
Yeah.
And so we really took to heart some of the things that they shared with us that has worked for them in the design of their classroom.
Okay, because I mean, obviously, we want to do the latest and the greatest, and not
Right.
saying, oh, we should have put this hood in another place.
No, yeah, I feel really confident that we have a good idea of what we need in that space.
Okay.
So it's just waiting to see what the drawings look like now at this point.
And then we can always fine tune it from there.
Sure.
Because the architect is, trying to capture what you guys need.
You bet.
Taking another look at it.
Cool.
I'm glad you brought that up too, so we picked furniture this week. And I had alluded to that, and a lot of that's based off your visits to Lake Mills too, which really is the latest and greatest, just not in Wisconsin, but in the country, if not the world. So Lake Mills is a fantastic school too, so you guys looked at some of the best.
Yeah, what Jen is referring to is Molly and I had an opportunity this last summer to go down to the Lake Mills Elementary School and just look at their library space, knowing that East was gonna have a library space.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
that was really exciting. And Molly, if there's any, like, I know you only have about a month to go, but if you want me to get any of the kids involved, like for anything, I can bring a shiny new concrete truck here when we pour. I can do fun facts, whatever you want to do to try to integrate some STEM there. I mean, I always bring my intern everywhere I go, so she can recognize a rooftop unit, she can hold the smart end of the tape. Anytime you want me to incorporate anything, I'm more than willing. I mean, I love this stuff, so I hope
Thank you.
get some kids in there too. So, all right.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you
you.
guys. Have a good
Okay,
night.
thank you.
That was a nice courtesy. We didn't miss it. We didn't miss it.
Brings us to the portion of the agenda titled Board of Education Committee Appointments. I have summoned all board members for current positions, asked if anybody was wanting to move to another committee. The responses I got were favorable to stay where everybody was. So what that leaves us with then for the coming year, the Buildings, Grounds, and Transportation Committee will be chaired by Mr. Cummings, 2 board members, Mr. Mortimer and myself. The Finance Committee will be chaired by Mr. McNevin with board members Cummings and Mortimer. The Personnel Committee will be chaired by myself with board members McNevin and Riley. And the Policy and Educational Legislation Committee will be chaired by Mr. Meering and board members Riley and Bedrow. The CISA representative will be Mr. Meering, and on the info that was sent out, it says 2016 WASB, that would be the 2016 WASB Convention Delegate Alternate, Mr. Meering and Ms. Riley, so that's more of an FYI. Thank you for those that are willing to serve on the committees that they are willing to serve on. Turn now to Mr. Pellin for an update on how we're implementing personalized learning in the district.
All right, so I had shared with you some information on kind of our next steps with personalized learning, and that was student device strategy that we're implementing, or we're planning on implementing for 2015 and 2016. So I thought I'd just give you kind of a flyover and let you ask questions. And a lot of this information that I put in here is similar to what I added to your board documents, but this will give you some time to ask some questions too. So the strategy again is in alignment with our strategic plan for personalized learning, and that is to provide a personal learning device to every middle school and high school student. And so really each middle school and high school student will be issued a Chromebook for school and for home. And this is again a shift, and you've probably seen this kind of theme. It's a shift primarily from supporting computer lab primarily and carts into providing individual devices for students. And our plan is to implement that over the next 2 years. And again, the instructional benefits are big and broad and certainly can be talked about extensively, but this kind of gives you a quick overview. Obviously, it broadens the learning beyond the classroom with access to so many different types of resources. We've guaranteed equity of access, so every student has the same device, the same access from 6th grade all the way up to 12th grade. And it develops our 21st century skills, and again, it fits right into our personalized learning piece of our strategic plan. And here's some direct impacts, and some of this, again, direct anytime access in the classroom. And so we've, if you're not familiar with our model, we've chosen to use carts, and staff check out the carts. And we run into an issue with the fact that there's not enough carts and enough resources that staff have to fight over the carts and access in the schools. So this again makes it much more powerful, much more impactful by putting that device in every student's hand. And now they'll be available anywhere, anytime throughout the school day. Another impact is obviously it opens up additional spaces. And if we move to this specifically, it's going to open up 3 spaces. For next year would be 2 at the middle school and 1 at the high school here. We're planning on doing something with that lab over there. And obviously the cost reduction, a Macintosh computer is $1,300 and a Chromebook is $250. So you can get about 5 devices for 1 on that cost. So that's a big shift as far as our cost allocation. And we're going to do, and this is, I'm really excited about this, is the development of a student tech team. And we're already in the process, about 80% done. And obviously I've looked at plans from all kinds of different school districts, Portage and Fond du Lac and Sheboygan, some of these big one-to-one school districts that have done this, and they have really strong tech, student tech teams that are supporting these devices in their schools. So that's a big bonus, obviously, to really engage that population into being a part of that broader, bigger picture. So it's exciting.
What training would they have to go through for that?
It's pretty minimal, and you know what's wonderful about a Chromebook is the fact that it's so simple, really, in its entirety. But there's already videos that are already made on how to repair those specific devices. So the way we would do it, Doug, is the plan is that we would provide some kind of initial support for those kiddos, for those students that are doing that, and they also have a teacher liaison, teacher, what do they call it, like a mentor for that specific, especially at the middle school, like TI or TA. And then once they kind of get their hands around the 10 things that would generally go wrong with the device, then they can help support it from then on out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So
it's great.
It should be a pretty nice implementation. I know there's a lot of students that are interested in doing that. Yes.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in seeing it from a perspective of peer-to-peer training and peer-to-peer work. So it's not just about the technology or that, but it opens up a whole opportunity for more kids to work with kids about the content, maybe even.
Sure.
And I'd like that to be considered as a part of a larger plan.
Sure. Yeah, it could be big, you know, so we're excited about that development too. So we're working on a model right now. And this is kind of, I put that at the bottom, testing management. Just taking tests in the schools is it's a big undertaking when you got 500 kids taking a test at one time and you don't have 500 devices in the building, and shuffling all that whole thing around. And obviously now students having their own access. It's minor, but in operational terms, it's really nice that a student would have their own device, be able to take the test and be able to do that. So some direct impacts there, and certainly there's others. And in my budget, the tech services budget can support that, and it can also support the other technology things we have going on in our school district. So, and if you don't know anything about a Chromebook, what's wonderful about it is it's easily managed on our side to help support that, where we can provide a device to a student that will be safe, filtered at home or at school, and obviously it will help us to be able to manage their experience and make it an overall good one for them. And it's obviously built on the Google Apps framework, which we have fully adopted in our school district for the past 4 years. So it'll be a seamless integration with teachers and students in their classrooms. And they're being built better for that cost. So we're seeing those devices actually last 3 to 4 years. So that's a good thing too. And there's the cost right there, $250 with the case. So.
Matt, do they connect to the internet? I don't have a Chromebook.
It is an internet appliance, basically.
Yes.
It needs internet. You know,
Right.
you can do offline work too, which is helpful for students who may not have access, but you can do that.
But,
But it's basically logging into your Google account, your Gmail account, and you're seeing Chrome basically.
and then that's where, when you say it's filtered, that's what you have your Google account, and that's what you get.
Yeah, but it's filtered by device though too. So meaning that it has content filtering, so kids aren't just going and doing whatever they want to. It's safe for kiddos, for students. So.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah,
You
go
brought
ahead.
up a point as far as access, because we obviously have quite a few students who do not have access
Right.
when they go home. Have we looked at anything like through E-rate or whatever, or trying to get them that type of access? I know there would be an expense to it, but is
Right.
that an option?
Well, currently there's options that we could look at in the future for giving kids wireless devices that they could take home and get internet through cell. But we don't have anything that in place, you know. But if students need to do something at home, they can use the offline functionality, do their work at home, and then come when they connect here or at the library or at the Boys and Girls Club or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Wherever there's a Wi-Fi connection.
Then they're back in business. So it's
Okay.
definitely, it's a really powerful tool, and I think students will find that they'll be able to get access somewhere.
Sure,
But
absolutely.
we haven't completely gone into the other side of things.
Okay, and that might be a future discussion.
And actually, we've talked to be honest with you, Lawrence and I have talked about checking that out to specific students, like a little Wi-Fi hotspot that they could take home if they needed access, so
That might-
it's in
yeah.
the works.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So in other words, if I understand what you're saying is, anybody that has a Chrome, or all the students will have to have like a Wi-Fi connection at home in order for these Chromebooks to work, correct?
To get internet, no, they could still do their work at home. They could do offline mode if they don't have internet access. But if they did have internet, obviously they could connect and share and do all the other things that so yeah, having an internet connection is optimal. But it still
Well, now,
works without it.
If you have Wi-Fi at home, does that mean if you're doing assignments at home,
Yep.
does that mean that if you have Wi-Fi at home that you can save that, but if you don't have Wi-Fi, you can't save? Is that right?
If they don't have, okay. So if they don't have Wi-Fi at home, they can still do their work. The thing is, it won't sync back up and share it back with that teacher until they get to a Wi-Fi access. Does that make sense? So they could do their report, they could do whatever project they might need, and then when they get back to school, it'll sync it all back up as soon as they get to, or to any kind of a Wi-Fi hotspot or you know, restaurant or whatever.
So
Sync
it
back
would
up.
be just like if they were working on paper and pencil, they did all of their activities at home, they
Yeah.
come in the morning, and instead of handing it to the teacher,
Thanks.
it's uploaded into the system, into the teacher's file,
You got
for the
it.
teacher to be able to.
Because it's very seamless like
work.
that, so as soon as it gets on a Wi-Fi, it
Right.
works, so.
So is it fair to say the Chromebook, unlike an iPad, has the ability to save without going to the cloud?
Absolutely.
Because I think that's what
Yeah.
Mr. Mortimer was getting at.
It's an optimal device for our environment and for what we're using with Google Apps for education, so yeah, you're right. That makes sense? Hopefully. But- So you can see here, powerful tool, very inexpensive. If you talk about repair and replacements, now obviously we have students that are utilizing these tools, taking them in and out, and laptops tend to have more damage. You just don't know what's going to happen. They're going to provide a case that's going to provide protection for that device. The student support team provides on-site device support. If families are billed for breakage and parts, replacement and parts costs are built into budget if parents aren't able to pay, which is similar to what you do for a book or anything else that they'd be allocated here in the school district. So it really follows that same protocol or policy. And then the last thing on the list there, families can actually purchase insurance for $17. It's up to them. If they want to enroll in that for $17, they'll have unlimited breaks. The student will have, and they can, they'll have that option. So. it is an
How much
option
have
to
you
do
got
that.
figured in for replacement parts?
What's that?
How much do you have figured in your?
I have 6,000 figured in right now for next year.
6?
Yep. And we just don't even know, what's going to happen. Some school districts, we've talked to everybody. Some have some extensive repairs. Some have more than others. We just don't even know yet. So we're hoping that we kind of.
So then, we've got, I'm not really enthused about this at the middle school, to be honest about it. But now, we have so many students in our school district that are on free and reduced lunch.
Got it.
Okay, now, they can't even afford to pay for the lunches. How are they going to, they aren't going to be able to afford to pay for breakage or lost Chromebooks or anything, are they?
But how would they, I guess I kind of turn back to the same thing with students and any other kind of thing they've been allocated. How do they, I don't know how they do it at the building level as far as if a student loses a book or breaks something that's been allocated to them, what do they have to do? I guess if you can't recoup it, you pay for it, right?
Taxpayers.
Well, somehow, somebody's gonna have to pay for it, obviously, so.
Another question I had was, do you think that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students are mature enough for this responsibility? I don't have a problem with 10, 11, and 12.
Sure.
But I think my personal opinion is there's a lot of middle school kids that aren't mature enough to take on this responsibility, if that's what I want to
Well,
say.
there's a lot of high school kids probably too, but we've kind of seen it across the board. We've been on so many visits in middle schools, and we've seen kids taking ownership in their devices and being able to really, again, treat it well and take care of it. But obviously, you're going to have your 2 kids that aren't going to
Yeah, I was at
handle that, supposedly.
I was at a PBIS conference about a year ago, and I was sitting with a group of teachers and middle school, and they were talking about PBIS, but they were talking about the behaviors that go into handling even this device, even walking around the hallway. So I mean, this is something that we probably should explore. It's like those behavior expectations, so that you're not carrying this around loosely, and is this something that could get damaged? And so,
And when that device, that's great, Doug, and when that device is delivered, they're going to have some kind of training session on how to really treat that device and how to take care of that device in an optimal
Yeah.
manner. So we've already kind of started that process, and I've seen that in many other school districts that are doing this.
no, we're not just, hey, here's your device,
No,
go.
we're going to provide them
Yeah.
with training, and we're going to continue to provide that support for
You
them.
got it.
And Ed, you bring up a concern I think we had too when we went and did school visits. That was a question that we asked, how are students handling that responsibility? And just anecdotally, we heard over and over again that teachers, principals were amazed by how careful students were with the device, because they really were cherishing the fact that they had that access, so they were a little bit more attentive with their device than maybe, they would be with a textbook.
We had similar concerns when we did bring your own device, because of course, we were worried about kids bringing an iPad and dropping it or something like that. We don't really deal with that at all.
I would also say keep our focus on what the big issue is here, which is the educational access and the movement in the direction to provide the skills and the training to young people for the 21st century. We're not giving textbooks that much anymore. Everything is being digitalized, it's the future. So the earlier that we are able to move them in that direction, I think the better all around, and further the percentage of young people that might abuse such a thing compared to those who will embrace it is small. And I don't think that should be an overriding concern about at least piloting this project forward, the same that we did with Bring Your Own and all of the other projects that we've done.
So you can kind of see here, there's going to be some options, and
It's beyond a pilot.
here's our timeline that we're planning on doing, the middle school and next year, and then the high school the following year.
Well, now, Matt, at the end of next year, you should come back and be able to tell us how many people and
Give you breakage
a lot more,
statistics.
because you don't really have a clue how much a lot of this is going to cost, do you?
You just don't know, I mean, nobody knows, you know, you really don't have somewhere just, yeah, you just got to kind of see what happens, you know. So
We're talking about the breakage, right? We don't know how much the breakage is going to cost.
We know how much it'll cost to fix it, absolutely.
But we don't know
how
the
many
volume.
Yeah, we don't know the volume.
Right, but
really don't.
we do have a management of the cost. It's in your budget to
Yep.
get
Contingency, absolutely.
these Chromebooks purchased, distributed, the plan to train, all of that's in place. So we're talking about an imponderable, so we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, certainly. And we're ready for it. It's good for kids, you know, so I'm super excited about this opportunity to do this. We've been talking about this for 5 years, you know, so this has finally just kind of worked its way into here in a very seamless way, so it's really exciting. You can kind of see here, we're going to send a parent letter out. I have all that information. If there's a link on your document there, if you are excited about reading some of the different things in there, you'll see all the parent letters, all of the handbooks. It's pretty much 95% done, you know, so we're ready to move forward with this, and again, super excited about doing it. And then we're going to work with John, obviously, on how we distribute those devices, but it'll definitely be in the first or second week of school is my guess. That's coming up here. So that's the timeline, and there's a resource if you're interested in seeing more information and how we're going to kind of disseminate that information out to our publics. It's all in there. So.
Is this going to require any new policies at this point? I think we got everything in place, don't we?
Yep.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I think we're set. It's just got the,
Yeah, I thought so.
There's a handbook in there that we have in there, but
Yeah.
other
Okay.
policies. Yes.
How many kids at the middle school, or students, I should say, at the middle school are going to get these?
I think 620 something, if I recall. It's
even more than that.
It's 640. I'll have to.
660 something like that.
Yeah.
But we have some devices
I
already.
ran those numbers. I should know those, but I have it all written in my budget. So, but you're right. It's probably 640, 660 something. To that.
And I assume that not every student, depending on their level, are going to get these. Not every student's
We're
going to
going to
get.
try to make sure that every student, obviously,
No,
and
every-
obviously Danny could probably speak to it better than I could. As far as some students, it may not be a good tool for their specific needs. I don't know, you know, it just depends on the student. But certainly I would assume most students are going to get access to one of these devices.
Well, I guess I'm thinking of like Christy Fell's room, I guess all of those students going to get them?
Might not be appropriate in that case.
Right, just depends.
Possibly, I think we'd have to look at it on a case by case basis.
But we'll have those conversations and make sure those students have the devices that they need to be successful.
But, you know, this is just part of our strategic plan. It's like personalized learning, and so, you know, we're going to do whatever we can to get as many of these, if not everybody. And so, yeah, adaptions are going to have to be made. That's personalized learning. And again, what I like about this is that it is proposed now versus 4 or 5 years ago. I think a lot of our teachers and students are more on board now than if we had done this 4 or 5 years ago. And we continue to do training, and I mean, I'm excited about the Tech Academy and many of the offerings there that are going to not just say, here's your device, go. It's giving our teachers the tools and the ability and to really make this a great environment for our students.
So this means you're going to have to buy probably quite a few carts also, right?
No carts?
Don't you put the Chromebooks in the cars to charge them?
No, the kids take them home and charge them. It's their responsibility to take them home, charge them, bring them to school.
Or do they just plug into a 110?
You got it.
They got a special charger, but it's
Yeah.
nothing
It's
special.
actually the carts that are at the middle school are going to be brought down to the elementary schools. So that'll save some cost down there for about $2,400 a cart, so.
So you really don't know a lot of these costs yet. You'll know more after next year, won't you?
Well, you
As
got
far as
most
the
of them.
support cost, I know the exact cost it's gonna take to implement it. Oh, yeah. I already have pricing for 600 and odd devices that we've purchased.
So what's the cost to implement this?
You know, I can send that stuff to you, but off the top of my head, I don't even, well, I guess you figure out $250 times.
We're not asking for additional dollars, though. This is
No.
all part of what we've already budgeted.
It's nicely right in there.
If you remember
I understand that.
the original timeline that we talked about with strategic planning, this is the next step in terms of allocation of resources and reallocation of resources to support the strategic plan goals. So I don't think the board will have to wait until the end of the year to get an update. I mean, I think it'd be more appropriate to do a mid-year update on just how the whole strategy is working at both the middle school and the high school.
Because, I mean, a large part of it is reallocation, because if I look back, I mean, we've got all these, and they're wonderful computers, these Apple computers that we have, but I can get, what, probably 5 or 6 Chromebooks versus one of those. And so we're revising where we were gonna
Changing
be.
the way how we're funding things.
And so we're basically at the same place financially, but way ahead with our students by doing it this way.
Impact, yeah,
Yeah.
obviously.
So it's not more money, it's just a different way of allocating.
Yeah, different way to look at it.
Mhm.
I'm gonna be interested in how responsible these middle school kids are.
Sure.
Well, they take pretty good care of their phones.
Well,
Yeah, because they're never out of their hands.
I went to a conference once where this student was funny, and of course, before he was speaking, he's sitting there going like this and on his device, and he actually gave this great presentation, and he says, "What do you think of this one-to-one?" It's like, I don't function without this. And, I mean, it's like a different world for me versus why am I here? And so, I mean, I believe that our student level engagement is just going to go through the roof, especially with many of our students who don't have these devices. And it's like, they're going to be like this, like death grip on it. And so, I mean, I believe that, and again, and I've heard that from other school districts where they want it so badly that they are going to protect it. It's very much so.
I have one more question. How are you going to put their names on these computers or these Chromebooks? How are you going to keep them?
We're going to have a labeling system in place, absolutely. We haven't quite figured out exactly how we're going to line it out, but they're all going to have some way of identifying who that device belongs to.
Well, then, will the 8th graders take it to 9th grade?
Yep, if you
Their
look.
Chromebooks? Because I don't see
Yes,
anything about 9th grade.
It's a 4-year device, so if you look at the plan that I had put together on there, you can see that they're going to get a new device every 4 years.
But each device.
It's not perfect because they're 7 years, so it's difficult.
But each device has their own serial number and so forth.
Yes, absolutely. And
So-
it'll be easily identifiable, so if a sort of student were to leave it somewhere, a teacher could pick it up and be like, oh, this is Jenny's,
Yeah.
device, so,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, you're going to have to have some, you can't be looking up serial numbers every time
No,
somebody needs
no,
it.
you're
You know,
right,
you-
absolutely. We're gonna wanna make it as easy as possible, but we'll put something as far as their name on the
Yeah,
bottom
there's
of
some
it.
clever ways to mark them up, you know.
Yeah.
My son has one from his school, and they have like a nice little card that's actually attached that has their name on it, so it can't be confused with anybody else's machine. So there's a lot of different ways to do that.
Magic mark.
Magic marker, sure.
Yeah, no magic marker.
Plumber's tape, plumber's tape.
I just want to say, I mean, what Doug said, through our professional network, personalized learning is really, the tool, the technology is just a tool in the overall picture of
Yes.
personalized learning. But there's a lot of promise from some of the school districts that have already moved forward in this fashion in terms of how fast students learning and how high their attainment is. So it's something that I think is really going to be beneficial for our students.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very much.
Thanks, Matt.
Brings us on the agenda to personnel recommendations. Both the rest of the board received and noted on their agenda the approval of a second resignation. That is for Abby Sita, the school social worker. So we have two resignations to act upon. The first is Megan Brinkerhoff from Al Bierman first grade, and then a second would be the school social worker Abby Tahita, and I would entertain a motion for the approval of those two resignations.
I move to approve both of those resignations.
Second.
Motion by Mearing, seconded by Vedro. Any discussion?
We already would post for social work.
We do not plan to post for the social worker at this time. We would like to delay any decisions about filling that vacancy until fall when we have a better picture of our funding level and our other priorities.
She's been on 1 year.
Further discussion?
The only thing is, at this point, at some point, we'd have to have some type of report of what occurred over the last year with that social
Absolutely. Danny's
worker.
been working on collecting that data.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
regardless of where we're going with it, even if it's like, oh gosh, we really need it, which I believe we really do. But what actually occurred last year. Thank you.
Those in favor of the motion as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Resignation is thus approved. Brings us to B, approval of new hires. I would entertain a motion for the approval of the slate 1 through 14. However, before we do that, there were some adjustments to the numbers that were sent out to the board earlier. That would be in regards to the placement for salary for Daniel Barr, which is for high school math. That number should be $38,000. And then also for number 9, second grade at East for Ashley Zook, that should be $40,000. And number 13 at Al Bierman, 5th grade, Laura Anderson, that should be $43,000, and those changes were based upon salary placement. So with those changes to the numbers you were presented, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the new hires 1 through 14.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mortimer, seconded by Mearing. Any discussion?
Those salary adjustments, is that a result of where they got placed on the grid that we created?
So what I did was review the materials prior to meeting with them, sent out the board agenda, and I have since met with all of the candidates to review the accuracy of their education and years of teaching. So that's why those adjustments were made.
So the teacher's compensation grid is active.
Yes.
Yep. All right.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Congratulations to the 14 new hires. And just a notation, because of the efficiency of the admin staff, the resignation that was approved in A was hired in B. So we didn't need a post. Sometimes things work out.
We're not finished yet, though. We'll be coming back with some more.
Brings us to C, the approval of a long-term sub for Al Bierman School Counselor, Sarah Steinmart. Entertaining a motion for that hire.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Riley, seconded by Vedro. Any discussion? Not to be confused with the school social worker. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion thus approved. Brings us to D, approval of the revised 2015-16 contract for Natalie Bush Emart. Explanation was provided in the board packet. I would entertain a motion for the approval of that change.
Move to approve the change.
Second.
Motion by Mearing, seconded by Riley. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us to new business. Mr. Mortimer, as the sole rep on the Finance Committee, I would ask that you,
Ed, you're
I will
okay.
entertain a motion from you for the approval of the April receipts and the disbursements for April 23rd through May 7th as presented to the board.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mortimer,
We're counting
seconded
on
by
you.
Mearing for the approval of the receipts and disbursements as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us to B, the 2015-16 budget draft. I will turn to Mr. Prefer, who was kind enough to present us with a draft packet. If there's anything that needs to be highlighted, Mr. Prefer?
Absolutely. So I went over this draft with the Finance Committee at our last meeting. and went page by page, looked at the budget a little bit, and everything seemed solid at the finance committee level, so I'm looking for an approval of this draft here at the board level. But prior to that approval, I do want to go through, not page by page, but I do want to go through a number of highlights within the document. It's my goal with this budget draft to try to provide you with enough information to fully understand our budget with regards to different funds and things along those lines, but also create it with a level of ease of understanding, so that it does make sense as you're looking through the document. So if you flip to page 4, basically I'm just providing an introduction to what a school district budget is and things along those lines. The timeline is basically taking that timeline that I had approved earlier in the year and putting it into narrative form. Down beneath that is a listing of the funds that our district uses. So our main fund, obviously, there is our general fund, and then there's a listing of all the different funds that our district uses. And then within this document, I go into more specific detail on what's going on within each of those funds. If you could flip to page 5. Page 5 outlines what is going on with our revenue cap from last year to this year. Or, I'm sorry, from this year moving forward to next year. Many districts across the state are seeing a flat line with their revenue limit, and they're not seeing an increase. The reason that we see that decrease for 15-16 is, once again, the removal of those declining enrollment exemptions that we qualified for in 14-15 that we will no longer qualify for in 15-16. We may see some deviation and we may qualify for a bit of an exemption, but nothing close to what we saw here with an extra $270,000 in 14-15. If you flip forward to page 6, that is just a picture of our enrollment count for the prior 3 years, the current year that we're in, and looking forward to next year. So you can tell there we have had a steady decline in enrollment. Nothing astounding, not a significant decrease in student enrollment, but a slight steady decrease. So that's something to keep in mind as we build a budget and we think about staffing and those kinds of things, that when you do see decreases in students, you may have to alter how a budget is built. If you flip forward to page 7. At the top of page 7, I go into a bit of detail on the proposed property tax levy for next year. So I give you a little bit of historical information there on what the property tax levy was in 13-14, what it currently is in 14-15, and then what we are proposing for 15-16. You'll note there that there is a levy decrease planned for 15-16 of about 2.6%. The Finance Committee is exploring some options to possibly stabilize that levy. There's some different things that, as a district, we can do to stabilize that levy. I've been given the go-ahead by the Finance Committee to work that into the second draft of the budget. So coming back on June 8th, I'll demonstrate what that stabilization effort would look like and how that would be done. Down towards the bottom, you see total expenditures and other financing uses. You'll note that 15-16, our planned expenditures are a lot higher, and that's simply because of our referendum spending. That'll take place this summer. Moving forward, pages 8 through 10 get into the general fund. And that's, obviously, as a district, that's where most of the action happens. You'll note that our budgeted revenue for 14-15, and I stress that word, our budgeted revenue for 14-15, this isn't going to be what our actual revenue ends up being, but that's what we planned for at the beginning of the year, was $30.7 million roughly. Planned for 15-16 is $30.1 million roughly. So that's a decrease of right around $600,000 that we're going to see, that we're estimating at this point that we will see less in revenue for next year.
Are we anticipating any significant change this year from that 30 $1,700,000?
I do not think so. I
Okay,
don't
it's gonna
foresee
be
a
pretty
significant
close.
change. Yeah,
Okay,
I would think so.
okay.
In terms of 15, 16, one item I do want to note here is the $150 per student of categorical aid. That amounts to about $450,000. So this number, this $600,000 number, a decrease in revenue, includes getting $450,000 less in categorical aid. So if we see some of those dollars come back, which reading the newspaper lately, it appears like those dollars might come back. Who knows until May and June are over whether we'll get those dollars back. But if we do, you will see an uptick in our revenue then for 15, 16, and that it would be a boon for our budget for next year. Just a couple other things I wanted to point out here. Aquatic Center revenue, it's the 6th item in that revenues table. That's not a huge increase in revenue that we're already all of a sudden seeing from the pool. We're simply shifting the revenues for the pool from our Fund 80 account over to Fund 10. So that's why you see it go from 0 to 67,000. It's just that we're shifting it out of one fund and into this fund. The last line, the DWD grant, is another one where there's a $59,000 revenue that you're seeing that we haven't had before, but that will be offset by a corresponding expense. So it's not like we're getting 59 grand to just go spend on whatever we want. The costs that are associated with the grant will offset that revenue.
It's for a specific program.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Anyone have any questions on revenue?
What are we doing, what are we selling off here to get 20 grand more in surplus property?
That's technology, selling off old, or not old, but technological items. And that was an estimate that Matt came forward with.
Just a clarification.
Yep.
The almost $600,000 under that we talked about.
Right.
We're anticipating if the legislature does give 150 back,
Yeah.
which simply brings us back to 0 from last year. That is, we're getting somewhere in the neighborhood of $450,000 against this $600,000 loss.
Correct. And I think what you would have to really keep in mind was the revenue limit page 5, that $272,000 decrease to the revenue limit. If we bounce back and get this 150 per student, that's the amount that you would see less, that $272,000. It's kind of misleading because you look at this and say 600 minus 450, that's 150,000, but that's because there's some other revenues built in here, the DWD grant, the aquatics revenue.
But nothing changes as far as the proposed property tax levy. We'd still be 2.6% below where we were last year. Even if the legislature comes through with the additional money.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's where we are looking at some different stabilization methods to possibly alter that levy. And
Yes.
we'll go into that in more detail in June.
Okay.
Any other questions on revenue before I go to expenses? Okay. So page 9 is where there's a list of expenses. And prior to doing that, I just want to make mention, there are notes under each of these tables that really provide you more detail on what is making up these numbers and why these numbers changed, and the same thing goes for expenses. So currently, we see in 14-15, our budget was $30,880,000 and change, and it is decreasing to $30,249,613, which is a decrease of $631,085. Much of that change is right on line 1, the personnel costs. And a huge part of that, well, there are really 2 large parts to that. The decreased OPEB contribution that the district has to make into our OPEB trust to pay for future retiree benefits. And the other huge item in there is the savings that we've recouped from a number of retirements. So an outgoing teacher making $65,000 and rehiring a teacher at $38,000. That's significant savings for the district. So where you see that $730,000 number, those two items that I just mentioned make up the majority of those dollars.
I'm sorry, that was
Yeah.
the post retirement benefit
Yep.
plan. that you-
Correct. So I think I've gone into this before, I don't want to go into too much detail, but we have to make a contribution to a trust. We're basically pre-funding our
Pre-funding.
retirement
Right.
liability.
So it goes up at first and then down later.
Yep. You will notice, if you compare our revenues from page 8 to our expenses from page 9, we still do have a planned deficit at this point of $131,000. However, that doesn't take into account things like if we don't rehire for the social worker or things along those lines. So while you see a $131,000 number sitting there right now, I expect that number to change both for June and change over the summer and into the fall.
One quick question on this particular page, curriculum is down 50,000. Is that, some of that due to the fact that we have new technology? Or what's the reason that is?
That was a reduction to help us try to have a more balanced budget.
Okay,
That came out of your line budget.
Right.
okay. But we feel like we're still able to do whatever we need to do.
She doesn't look happy. I wouldn't say she
Yeah, I
looks
mean,
happy.
the K-12 curriculum leaders work with the K-12 teams of teachers to bring forward every year what are those needs across the district. And based on those needs, then the whole district curriculum council prioritizes with the dollars that we have in the curriculum budget, how to best meet those priorities. And, you know, this is the first year where we had to have some really tough conversations about some things need to wait. And we really had to put a lot of more emphasis on prioritizing, where in the past we've been able to maybe meet those needs a little bit better.
Okay. Good.
But I would say that you're right, that as we spend more money in technology, then less funding is needed for textbooks.
But we haven't clarified that in the budget here at this point. Okay. Which might come in a future budget.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Jeff, where's our, we have a transportation category, where does the district's purchase of fuel, where's that line item at?
That would be under transportation.
So that's in transportation?
Yeah.
Because I still have a feeling that when our budget for this year is reconciled, that our expenses for fuel, I'm not sure what our budgeted number were, but I mean, within the last 6 months, fuel has been 25 to 40% lower than what it was at the beginning of the school year. So I would hope that there's some money that we won't have spent.
There is, and I did follow up on that. I think you and I had spoke about that at one point, and we are trending underneath what we budgeted right now. Will it be a huge significant savings? No, but it'll be something. And I'll definitely provide an update of that once we get there.
Just another quick point on the utilities. A huge jump in utilities.
Two big reasons for that. The pool, a large portion of the pool is having to be moved into Fund 10, so that's where you're seeing a big chunk. Also, new air conditioning being installed all over the district, that's the other part of that.
Just a side note, the county board, Sauk County Board, is looking at third-party solar and energy reductions that are significant. And earlier in the year, I spoke to this board about maybe taking a look at that because as we expand our footprint, it would be a great idea to ensure a movement toward more green activity that also provides significant savings on the utilities end. So just wanted to plant that seed as we move forward.
And if that's a direction we want to head in, I'm certainly open to researching.
Well, including this increased costs down the line, there is a window, as we know, that federal government is offering grants up to more than 30% with buyback opportunities to own our energy output and to reduce this line significantly. And I think the finance and the buildings and ground ought to take some serious look at what other schools and what other communities are doing to manage these kinds of costs under utilities.
Dan could probably share a little more information on that because he was involved in some early discussions with our architects and construction management.
So
I don't want us to lose sight of that. as we're moving forward in all of this construction, that's all.
Absolutely. One item to note, prior to moving on to some other funds, is you would, if the budget stayed as it's listed here, we would see another reduction to our fund balance, which is of concern to me, and I think it should be of concern to the district that we are now at a point where we're under 10% of expenditures in our fund balance, and we need to take a look, moving into the future, at beginning to replenish that balance. If you flip to page 11, we'll speed up a little bit. Page 11 is a listing of all the position changes that we've had within the district in terms of FTE changes. Again, I expect this may change by June 8th, so you'll see, again, another updated version when we get there. Page 12 is our special revenue trust fund. It accounts for gifts specified by donors to be used for operating purposes. This really has never been budgeted for before, and this is just a process that I want to begin moving forward. These are very rough estimates, but this will become clear as the summer moves along. Fund 27 on page 13. In 14-15, you see budgeted amounts. There are some values within that column that have significantly changed throughout the course of the year. CISA costs being one of them. We had some significant cost increases due to some CISA needs. So you will see at the end of the year that those costs will come in a bit higher than what was estimated at the beginning of the year. You'll see in 15-16 that there are some decreases to the personnel costs with regards to special ed. And again, that's similar to Fund 10, where it was a huge savings from our OPEB contribution. Any questions related to Fund 27? All right, moving along.
Well, I mean, the only thing, and of course, that's something we obviously got to look at, is these CISA costs are obviously concerning. And I know they're necessary, but, you know, there's some things that we can reallocate and do them ourselves. But that's not for tonight, but just a point of concern and note that we need to continue to look at those.
And that's been a talking point that we've had amongst the administration.
I can believe it.
What can we do? Funds 38 and Funds 39.
I'm sorry, I just
Yeah.
want to draw attention
Yeah.
to the fact that the state aid has been reduced 7.1% in Fund 27, which focuses on our special ed needs.
Yeah.
At the same time at which special ed needs are rising astronomically. You can always count on me to make that point to our community.
And Crystal actually had done some research where, I forget how many years ago, special ed was funded.
67%, and now it's under 25 or around 25%.
This is not just a state issue, it's a federal issue too. So, right. Okay.
Right, Funds 38 and
Good note.
39 are on pages 14 through 16. Those funds are where we house both the tax levy for our referendum and our non-referendum debt, and also where we pay out the principal and interest owed according to the amortization schedules for both of our borrowings. If you move forward to page 17, which is our capital projects fund, 49, that's where all the borrowing gets dumped. So when we received the referendum dollars last summer in July, the entire balance was put into this Fund 49, and then that's where we pay all of our invoices from, and all the work that's done and everything that we do with regards to those two projects. This is where the dollars flowed into and where the dollars will flow out of. This is also where we will realize any types of revenue from investing the dollars that we borrowed last summer. On pages 18 and 19, I just give a description on what's going on with the non-referendum and referendum projects. So again, contact me if you have any questions on any of the projects. Page 20 is the food service fund. The biggest change with our food service fund next year is moving the food service director's salary out of our general operating fund and into our food service fund. I think the overall goal of your food service program should be to try and become self-sustaining and try to break even. So that's really the goal of taking a big chunk, a big expenditure related to the food service program and putting it where I have a belief it belongs, in the food service fund. You'll note that for 15-16, by doing that, we are projecting a deficit budget for our food service fund, but you'll also notice that they have a beginning fund balance of $145,000. So any type of deficit that we incur next year within the food service program, we're going to use our fund balance to help cover that deficit and that shortage. Questions on that?
Credit card fees are those like charges from the credit card company or what?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
2.9%.
$13,000. Yeah, okay. But that's just a cost of, we say a cost of doing business because we're getting better collections as a result of using that.
And truthfully, I'm not 100% certain. I would have to go back and look at that. I have an assumption that that is going to be students utilizing and loading up their Infinite Campus account with money to use through the food line. That would be my assumption.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And we chose to not pass those costs on.
Okay, it's better utilization than, I'm sure, I knew when I did it, it was like so much more convenient to do it that way. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Page 21 outlines the private benefit trust fund, that's Fund 72, and this just houses 3 different scholarships that the district has. Employee Benefits Trust Fund, Fund 73. This will most likely be the fund that you will see the most change between what you see here in this document right now and what it evolves to in both June and over the course of the summer. I've attempted to break down for 15 and 16 what I believe will be the revenues and what I believe will be the expenses related to this fund, but I'm still in the process of getting our new trust set up with the new investment company that was approved in early April. Once I have that trust set up and I have a better understanding of exactly what can be paid out of the trust, I'll have more information for you. There's a bit of confusion between some of the companies I've been working with on what exactly can come out of the trust, so I'm working with them to try and identify. I want to put as much into the trust as I can possibly put in and pay out of the trust as much as I can possibly pay out, so I'm working towards that. One item that's going to be, I think, a big bonus for the school district this year with regards to our Fund 73 is moving our trust assets from BMO Harris over to AUL, American United Life. BMO Harris, our interest rate was substandard that we were earning on $700,000 that we had in the bank. Now we're moving to a fixed interest rate of 2% and projecting almost $11,000 in interest earnings, where before it was $200, something like that. So we should see a lot more interest flowing into the trust.
Okay, good.
You know, a great interest rate of 2%. So we get to
Yeah, that's really good.
Final item, page 23, pages 23 and 24. Something I said at the Finance Committee, and I'll say here as well. This fund represents 1.2% of our overall budget, and I think it's the fund I have spent most of my time attempting to figure out. This is the fund that the state legislature is putting a microscope on and is looking at in more detail. They're making sure, this is our community services fund, so it's where we can fund community activities like adult education, recreation, childcare, different items. And in the past, we've had driver's ed in this fund and some other items that, working with DPI, we deemed were not allowable. So I've had to take, and I know I've discussed this at length within these board meetings before, but I've had to take some items from our Fund 80 and transfer them to the general fund. And then I was tasked with well, let's come up and find some items that we currently haven't been funding out of our Fund 80 and see if there's anything that we can move in there. The big thing I want you to look at is on the very last page, page 24. What we are going to do for 14-15 is we are going to continue to keep $184,559 of the pool within this fund. We are shifting the Boys and Girls Club shuttle. We've been working closely with our transportation vendor to identify the costs related to that shuttle. That's the amount. And then Kid Stop, they have a projected deficit this year. We are going to help cover that deficit with this fund as well. So we levied at the beginning of the year for $248,775. We have found costs to utilize that full levy for 14-15. Moving forward into 15-16, I again looked at our expenditures to attempt to ascertain whether or not there are other items that we're currently doing within our school district that could be transitioned into this fund, because this fund has a dedicated tax levy and we don't have to use our Fund 10 tax levy to fund these activities. So the three items that I've identified that we're going to look at funding out of Fund 80 for next year are again the pool, and you'll notice the numbers the exact same as it was for 14-15. The Boys and Girls Club shuttle, the transportation costs are increasing next year, so that's why you see a higher number there versus 14-15. And then finally, middle school athletics. Middle school athletics was deemed a community activity if you allow private school and homeschool students to participate in your sports and clubs. From sitting down and speaking with Jim Langkamp, we already allow this practice in all but two sports, and those two sports being basketball, I think boys basketball and girls volleyball. So we've decided to try it out for a year and allow private school and homeschool students to play those two sports and basically open it up to whoever would like to do it. And then we're able to utilize this fund to make it happen. So that's where you see $120,868 shifting from our Fund 10 budget over into our Fund 80.
And I'm sure you've beaten this horse and you'll probably continue to keep beating it. We have different people who, even in our own district, as far as administration, like Jim Langkamp is one who obviously he's highly involved with that. Is that part of that budget too? That 120 might be some of his salary is allocated to that?
Jim is not, and that was something I went back and forth on and hemmed and hawed whether I should include him within it. From speaking to DPI, they're really against the proration of anything to put in here. So saying, oh, 15% of his time is dedicated to this or that, you really have to do time studies and prove every single thing that you're doing. And that's something we're doing with the pool. I have lifeguards submitting separate time cards, whether they're working a school event versus a community event.
Yeah.
I have a meeting tomorrow morning to analyze the amount of gas for heat in the pool that is being utilized for community activities versus school activities. So there really there's a lot that goes into it when you're attempting to prorate something and include it within this fund.
Yeah.
And something I looked at with Jim was, when we got down to it, putting 10% of his salary in the fund, I don't want to say it wasn't worth it, but it was a lot of work to get $10,000 more into this fund. So that's where I just made the decision, this middle school athletics, this was a pretty significant item to put into this fund. And we are going to be increasing our levy related, if this goes through within this draft, we would be increasing our levy by $100,000 already. So to try and, again, find other things to put in here, at some point, it needs to be capped.
But we're able to do it because we're already allowing community members or community students to partake.
Exactly, and something it would be my recommendation to do would be to put it on our website, perhaps put an advertisement in the newspaper, welcoming welcoming homeschool and private school students to participate.
That is a part of our strategic plan from several years ago when we looked around and saw, I believe it was something like 178 potential students that are being homeschooled, to create a process to reach out to them. And part of it started with athletics, the arts, areas in which more engagement with peers and others under the umbrella of the school might entice them to look at further engagement with us. So I'm hopeful that we're still on top of that, because that's low-hanging fruit, as it were.
Can you spend a little bit of time on the Kid Stop? I mean, because in our 2013-14, we had no Fund 80 Kid Stop line item. We do for 14-15, and now in 15-16, we're not planning on it. Why don't we plan on it?
That's something I wanted direction from, or direction on from the board. If that is something that you want me to work into this, I am more than happy to do that. That was actually a discussion point that I wanted to bring up with the board tonight, so good segue. So I guess if that's the direction you want me to go in, I'm happy to do that.
Well, I think maybe, you know, if we can justify that, you know, if we're doing it for 14-15, if we're justifying it in Fund 80, you know, especially if this is under a microscope. To me, looking under the microscope, it wasn't there, it's there, it's not there.
Yep.
That stands out.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, if we found a way to get it in this year, you know, and we need to be careful about what's happening with Fund 80 from a taxing standpoint too, because we've got all of our referendum monies and everything else that's going to be a change in the tax bill when the tax bill comes out. But, you know, something like Kid Stop, I think my suggestion would be that we have an in-depth discussion about who Kid Stop serves, why it could or couldn't be part of Fund 80, other than just we've decided that it's community service. I think if we all had a better understanding of why Kid Stop could be part of Fund 80, maybe then it would be easier to decide whether the board would want to provide direction to put it there.
And it's absolutely allowable to dedicate levy for Kid Stop. And the whole reason why it's allowable is because it's open to the community. And I've spoke with Nick Carls and with Pat Gavin about, hey, how many private school students have attended Kid Stop in prior years? And they have a list of students that that weren't district students but still participated in the program.
But if you're not prorating it, then how do you decide what portion goes into Fund 80?
What I would do is you look at your revenues for the program, you look at your expenses. If you're projecting a deficit budget, you take the deficit and that's how much you levy for, and you close. You don't try to make money on the program, but you try to break even. That would be my suggestion.
I would also suggest that's one of the greatest contributions the district can make to the community, other than the pool. And, you know, we have parents that are struggling and have no other options. And this is the premier option to take their children and put them in an environment that's safe, sound.
Well, if we're talking about changing the fee structure to cover 25,000, I mean, who knows what the projected deficit would be next year.
Right.
But if we're talking about changing the fee structure, you know, what impact is that fee structure going to have? I mean, I'm removed from Kid Stop a number of years. I don't know what the schedule is anymore.
Right.
I think it would be interesting for the board to have some information, not necessarily an in-depth hour-long conversation about it, but some information about what the fees are, when's the last time they were changed.
We just changed some fees for the summer.
Yep.
Right, and we'll probably be looking at fall too.
They are looking at the fall.
But when were they previously changed? I mean, just some historical context. When was the last time before that they were changed? What was the percentage increase? You know, I would hate to see us try and cover the deficit by increasing fees, and that's going to affect our participation in the program.
Absolutely.
So, anyway, just.
I think I can give you a little bit of history on the fees, but from the inception of Kid Stop, which was like around 1998, the fees were pretty steady up until about 2 or 3 years ago. And then because the fee structure was like hourly rates and very, you know, different depending on, you know, if you had one child attending or two children attending, and there was a lot of computation involved with how that was figured every week. There was an attempt to look at how to streamline the fee structure a couple of years ago and to create something that would be family-friendly, user-friendly, and without increasing the fees. But I think what's happened now is that you know, there's a need to start looking at that again as far as how to make sure that the revenues are meeting the expenditures.
And we did have Nick Carls come to a finance committee meeting, and we discussed the fee structure and what was going on with that, but perhaps it would be better to have a full board discussion, especially if we're looking at working that back into the levy.
To me, it's the $25,000 in the context of our $30+ million budget. It's not a significant number, but what happens with that $25,000 might have a significant impact on people that are utilizing the program. And I don't know yes or no. I mean, I'm not in a position to say it would or it wouldn't. I just think that we should have a little bit more involved discussion. So I'll defer that for another time.
And one item I do want to make mention of is when you see a 2.6% levy decrease next year built into this budget, that includes the increase from Fund 80. That includes 348,000 some odd change being levied in addition to our Fund 10 levy and our referendum debt levy. So just keep that in mind, that the increase in levy in Fund 80 is already included in that 2.6% decrease.
Even though it's larger than it was last year?
Yes.
Okay.
Does the board have any further questions in
Yes.
regards to the document?
Jeff, page 15, when it comes to the debt service, I see that in expenditures, I think see in 2014-15, we owed $410 and we paid $220 on the interest, as interest. In 15-16, our principal owed is less, but our interest owed is up 29%. Why is the interest so much higher?
Great question.
You're welcome to look into it.
Yeah, but I'm trying to.
I thought you might right away know, oh, our increase percentage increased this much.
You stumped me.
No, that's okay.
I was thinking it may have to do with only having one payment in 14-15 versus two payments in 15-16, because that was the first year of our borrowing. But I'm not 100% certain, so I'll check into that and get back to you.
All right, thank you.
Would you copy the whole board on that?
Absolutely.
The other thing I'd like to say is really thank you for this document. I mean, it's not great news, I wish it were better news, but I understand more about the budget now than I have in 3 years. In fact, I think I knew of the 10 funds or so that we have, 11. I only knew about 4 of them.
Okay.
So, or at least understood them. So I really appreciate this, and I hope that the $150 returns per student. And the other thing is, there is one other thing, and that is, I know this is kind of a non-profit way of thinking, but it seems to me that if we put on our website, under the community link, the opportunity for giving, that is estate planning, or not estate planning, but plan giving, if you, maybe an argument about how much we've lost in state funding for the past 3 years, and then we'd be happy to to accept your donations, or, I know, but I think we're almost at that
For
point.
students it is. We have a student donation account.
Yeah, I don't
You
see
talked
it-
about more plan giving.
You know?
We have quite a healthy balance for student donations
Mhm.
from our community members, but.
Is it
They
through the
might just-
community foundation?
No,
Well, the estate planning is.
the plan giving.
Plan giving, yeah.
Mhm.
There is,
To the greater Sauk County.
there is a fund there? Well, I'd like to
Yeah.
see it mentioned then that there is a fund there.
Maybe we could include that on the finance page.
If you'd like to give, talk to Greater Sauk County.
Um,
It doesn't hurt if there's
No.
somebody who's thinking about it late at night.
When a kid gives to me.
I think we
Yeah.
already do that.
I mean, we talk about the $150. I mean, what's happened in the legislature has been unprecedented. The level of people that have spoken, community members, parents, students, school board members, administrators, and each one of those people has been necessary to even get us back to where we're not even potentially not going to be cut. And you know, we're having a discussion tonight where we have our social worker leaving, and we're discussing potentially not hiring one. And so, and that's even if we get that $150 per student, that's going to be a very serious discussion. And so, I mean, the legislature, when they talk like they're coming in like heroes, and well, you know, this is like you're a hero that you haven't cut us, and we need to be able to obviously get that $150, but there are needs that go beyond just having a zero-based budget, which is basically where we're at. And so keep your cards and letters coming to the legislature, and we need to, this is going to be an ongoing, continuing discussion. This is obviously draft one, and that we're approving, but there will be continuing changes as we even go forward, even with this, so.
Is that a
Yeah.
motion?
Well, the two budget priorities that, forgive me if you, I know you mentioned the fund balance, and that's, you know, that we need to start to address that, but also staff wage and salary increases for next year. There's nothing built into the expenditures for the budget, so, again, you know, it's a matter of prioritizing. We don't want to eliminate some of the things that we have, but we also have to take care of the staff that we have working for us.
And I understand that. That's part of what I'm saying, is even if we get the $150, like, oh, now I can get my social worker, we have to take care of the staff that we have on hand. And, because, you know, they're employees, and they've done a great job for us, and we need to continue to support that, to keep them working for us, so. So, I mean, yeah, we have a lot of continuing tough decisions to make, even if the legislature comes through with the promises that they've recently made, so.
Here, here.
Do you wanna ask for a motion?
Would you-
Oh, I move to approve the draft one as it's proposed and written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having a motion by Mearing, seconded by Mortimer for the approval of the 2015-16 budget draft. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. And thank you for, as
Thank you.
Ms. Riley said, the document that was provided to us. It's very
Yeah,
beneficial.
Really
It's
clear.
clear.
Mhm.
We have a lot
And
of
I'm glad
things
we
still to
spent some time
discuss.
talking about it, seeing as how you spent some time putting it together.
Yes.
Just a little bit. Brings us then to C, the approval of an additional Badger parent exam request.
I move to approve the a request.
Second.
Motion by Mearing, seconded by Bedrow. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, request granted. Brings us then to D, and I assume that Mr. Hubble is going to help us with that, which is the short-term, long-term. Is Jeff?
That's actually me
All right,
again.
sorry.
Sorry, so listen to me again.
Short-term, long-term disability insurance plan, there was an explanation provided in the board packet, so unless anyone has any additional questions, we can certainly entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mearing, seconded by Vedro. Any discussion?
Again, thank you for the work, and if I read the documents correctly, looking at transferring from WEA to the new organization is providing savings at the same time at which maintaining the coverage.
And the savings is both for the district and for our
And-
employees.
and-
So the district will save roughly $15,000. Our employees will save, anyone that signs up for short-term disability will save 10%. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. And the coverage is longer, too.
Yeah, and there's more options.
Wow. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to the item listed as E, the revisions to the employee handbook. First up is the question as to the effective date of the revisions that will ultimately be passed by the board shortly. So, Mr. Hubble, you want to take that question?
Yes, historically, the effective date of the revisions in this round of handbook considerations is the first day of the fiscal year, so it'd be July 1st of 15. And then you do have a list of proposed revisions that went through the Personnel Committee. And prior to that, with rare exceptions, they went through the Handbook Committee as well, which is comprised of 3 teachers, 3 support staff members, 3 administrators, and also Board President Bodak. So I'd be willing to take any questions on any of the proposals, revision date.
The only question I have, which I raised earlier with our district administrator and others, is we have many of our teachers who are parents, and I wanted to make sure that our, quote, parent teachers who need to get their children into school at a certain time are not put in a bind, and I just needed some more clarification on how we're going to do that. I know there's a stipulation that says a teacher can negotiate with the principal a structure. I'm not sure that is sufficient to resolve an unintended consequence that makes a teacher / parent have to decide where to be late if they can't be early. That's any guidance you can give to that in terms of what discussion there might have been and how any solutions that were offered.
Absolutely. So to review what Mr. Vedro is referring to, he's referring to the teacher's workday. Currently, the teacher's workday it varies by school, but it's roughly 10 minutes prior to the arrival of the students and roughly 10 minutes after the students leave. And then to the extent that that does not make up an 8-hour day, teachers are given discretion to work at home or at school to make an 8-hour day, so there's a 40-hour week at least. And acknowledging that most of our teachers work way more than that already, so much of this is a technicality, but it is something that needs to be addressed. So for 2 reasons, the proposal was brought forward to have an 8-hour day at school. One is with the reduction in the EAs, there may be a need for supervision at school, and so to a certain extent, teachers can provide that supervision. And again, the goal with that is that not every teacher would be doing it every day. It would be distributed in kind of a organized fashion, thank you. And the second reason is for purposes of ASOP, which is our online substitute system. If a teacher's absent for a whole day, that's an 8-hour day, but if really they're only technically need to be in school for 7.5-hour days, that really created some nightmares for the business office when they were trying to allocate absences. So we brought an 8-hour day, 7:30 to 3:30 to the handbook committee, and many of the same things that Mr. Vedro is mentioning were brought up by the teachers. What about a parent who needs to drop off his or her child at 7:35 and can't get to school till 7:38? Things of that nature. So we brought back another proposal, and the new proposal says 7:30 to 3:30 or any other 8-hour day, be it 7:35 to 3:35 or 7:25 to 3:25, subject to approval by the supervisor, which in the majority of cases would be the principal. And so the purpose of that was to create that sort of flexibility that you're referring to. I'm not sure what else could be done. I'm open to ideas of the board. One idea when you were speaking was I could, when I always send out these handbook revisions to the staff, to the principals, I could perhaps put a note to the principal that it's the intent of the board to have maximum flexibility for the teachers, keeping in mind that the principals have to operate their schools as well. But the purpose of the board is to allow for flexibility for situations like the ones you bring up.
I do.
Excuse me, but just the historical piece of it, we only had that flexibility, that language about prep time at your discretion, where and when, for several years. And we're finding that we don't have enough supervision of students before and after school. And it's, as Craig said, it's not to assign somebody a 7:30 duty every day, but as we've done in the past, a teacher takes a supervision here, another one takes here. If you spread that out among all your staff, it has very little impact with that single duty. So it's not every day.
Right, no, I understand, and we all know that we're asking our teachers to do more and more and more and more and more and more, both in their field and out, within the context of what has happened to education. So here's a situation where the maximum flexibility for a parent-teacher needs to be considered. I don't have the answer, but I know probably our principals sitting down with those teachers that are impacted can figure it out. And I want those teachers to know that the board supports that and supports our principals to work that out as they do these other allocations. Because I don't want our teachers who are under such stress to say, oh my God, what do I do with my child? Why isn't my school paying attention to my child? So help us, and the only way to help, as I understand it, is to ask those people who are impacted to help us solve it. They know the answer, and I would like to see that as a part of this.
But it was a part of this.
It was, yeah.
Well, I mean, a part of it says, you can work out 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after.
Well, but the discussion, and you can interrupt me and chime in anytime. The discussion at the handbook committee level was, there was a number of scenarios that were brought forward. How do we address this? How do we address this? Craig came forward with a proposed set of wording that there were a number of people at the table, said this isn't going to work. Can we do this? Can we do this? At the end of the day, after a pretty prolonged discussion about that single item, Craig said, let me take what everybody said, and I'll come back with what I heard you saying at the next meeting. At the next meeting, that's exactly how it was presented, and it passed unanimously. So, and I don't think Craig or I or anybody that sat there, said this is perfect, but it was a start, and I think we left that meeting with the assumption that maybe it needs to be tweaked, maybe it needs to be changed, and that's part of what having a handbook allows us to do, as opposed to something that's contracted and negotiated, which is a little bit more difficult to change. And the sentiment that you're expressing was certainly expressed to anyone who brought it forward.
Absolutely.
And I think if Craig can articulate that when it's sent out to the principals of the buildings that are affected, maybe something does need to be tweaked, but not having even implemented, I'm not sure if this is going to work or perfect or whatever, but I think it was articulated that we need to start somewhere. So
I would agree. I simply want to I honor the work that the committee has done always in collaborative engagement. I just want to highlight that we still need to keep a focus on it, and that the focus should come from those who are impacted, and that the channel of communication should be wide, open, and clear. And I'm sure
And I think that's one of the reasons why we have all the employee groups have representatives, because they go back and they talk to people in their buildings and come back with suggestions and concerns and ideas, you have to put it in context of a larger picture also, in terms of what we offer staff, and look at other districts. When we put that language in place initially, prep time at your discretion, where and when. I don't think any other district have that. And so, you know, again, we're tweaking it, and it will probably continue to evolve.
Yes,
you know, as it
absolutely, and it was the
changes.
right decision to put that language in, because that has provided for our teachers a sense of engagement and involvement, even in turmoil. And I just want to make sure we keep that process going, as we have.
So I appreciate that, and if, assuming it passes, I will express to the principals when I send out the language, the sentiment of the board that the goal is to have, to the extent possible, flexibility to accommodate teachers' schedules. If I'm hearing you correctly.
Especially with children, yes.
Especially with children.
Does anybody have any questions in regards to any of the other proposed revisions? I'm going to suggest that we don't go through them line by line. I don't want to, I mean, there were, you know, well, it was important work, and it's going to be implemented, you know, in the motion, whoever makes the motion will implement it as of July the 1st, 2015.
And I would like to honor the work, I mean, having participated in a minor way.
It's a lot of work.
A lot of work,
good
and the committee should be honored and acknowledged, and, you know, Craig as well. And we should chain him to his chair so he can't leave us, but beside that.
Probably won't.
We had
He's probably got a saw by
very
his
good direction from Mr. Hubble, and yeah, without his input and work, a lot of this may have been bogged down, and some of these would have never been addressed to the point of reaching the board tonight. So, thank you.
I make a motion to accept the proposed revisions.
With the implementation date of July the 1st.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Second to that motion.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Mortimer, seconded by Mr. Meering to effect the employee handbook with the proposed revisions, July the 1st, 2015, as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us then to F, which is the approval of the additional certifications and degrees for teacher compensation. This is something that came from the Teacher Compensation Committee. It also was brought to the Personnel Committee meeting at our last meeting. I don't know if anyone wants any further explanation.
I do have one clarification. Number 4, it should read mental health first aid trainer or instructor certification. So those would be the types of certifications that Ann and Kathy have as they provide that training to our staff.
I move to approve the list of F 1 through 10 with that additional change in wording on 4.
Second.
Motion by Meering, seconded by Vedro to approve the 1 through 10 under F with the addition of the word trainer after first aid on number 4. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Having a motion and a second, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Notation to the board, I know we've adjourned, but remember, we meet next Monday.